vlogist. Wouldn't call myself an artist. Yeah, I dabble in overhead projections and a lot of visuals using items you can get everywhere, like oil, water, food coloring, and yeah. And I respond to sound when I do my visuals, so everything is on the fly. Yep.
Yes, my name is Bani, and yeah, as a duo, we do a lot of improvised music. So she does the visuals and I do the sound. That's pretty much what we do as a duo. The Observatory and Off Cuff are two very different groups in many ways, because with Off Cuff we are quite purely based on improvisation, and there are two visual artists and two sound artists, and the interest is more about how for us to discover intersections between sight and sound, and how these two mediums can communicate with each other. So it's more process based, where we're discovering other forms of vocabularies in terms of performance, whereas with the Observatory it's more of a traditional band setting. The songwriting process may be based on improvisation, but essentially the outcome is still rooted in songs, so it takes on a more traditional role in music making with the Observatory, whereas with Off Cuff it's a little bit off kilter that way.
It's more a concentrated kind of reaction and action, as opposed to having, because I can only compare it to the quartet, which is with Off Cuff. I don't know how it's like being in a band, but I guess the reaction is more concentrated that way. Yeah, there's only two people, so we respond, and yeah, that's about it.
It was expressed somewhere on the internet that much of your inspiration comes from the existence of mess, such like messiness. As such, which of the two concepts would you usually apply to your creative process? A. Systematic chaos, whereby a conventional composition is made before being altered accordingly to experimentations. Or B. Trance music, which allows one to leave components of composition open to unedited mistakes and natural sounds during the composition process.
Nice question. I think essentially when I speak about mess, it's really being inspired by whether I am aware of a particular system or not. But essentially when you think about mess, it's really this web of things that exists somewhere, and you try to make sense of it one way or another. You're not sure what it is just yet. But I guess when I say I draw inspiration or ideas from mess, I think it's really about, mess could be even the simplest of defined characteristics. Anything that is defined could be also a mess. You see it as it's already existed in a certain definition, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's set that way. So whatever mess involved in the definition, you could still draw your own conclusions, and you could rethink and reevaluate what that definition means. So I guess having said that, to both points A and point B, as you mentioned, as much as it is about them being explicitly about something that's formulated or something that's open-ended, it comes from both sides. And I guess it's not, I don't see myself limiting to any of those particular types.
So I guess I can kind of like conclude that your music opens up to different possibilities that people don't usually understand it to be conventional. So you kind of pick on things that are considered messy in a way that, because there are possibilities to make art.
The whole idea of experimenting is that it should not, well, it probably might not end up being safe. It could be even transgressive in nature. So the whole idea of being involved in experimentation is that you discover something. So through whatever mess of stuff that happens, you hopefully uncover something new. It's actually, with the whole core of experimentation, I'm influenced by well, oddly enough, a physicist who actually said the beauty of being someone who experiments is that one of two things happen: you learn something new, or you prove someone else wrong. So I kind of like that state of mind that you could always discover something and you see it. Well, if you listen to the songs, the 4 tracks that we did, it's born out of improvisation between the both of us. We were trying out some new ideas and some new devices that we've come up with, and through that, we selected portions which we felt were nice, were interesting, and then basically restructured it and rearrange and recompose the bits that actually made sense or feels good. So it's almost like a combination of different things: noise, structure, free verse, but everything then still gets structured and you get, I don't know, something quite strange and interesting at the same time, I guess. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite electronics or equipment used for musical experimentation?
Well, I actually do not fancy new toys so much. I mean, I enjoy it just as a, from an aesthetic perspective. Like, it's nice to be able to decorate it in this manner, but the core of my work still revolves around acoustics, so I enjoy hacking instrument more than I do getting gadgets. So we got to this. So, but anyway, one of the things that I'll be using today is a new contraption that I just devised. It's basically a snare drum that got hacked, and you could play it. There are strings attached to it, so it's. It produces a very strange sound, and more than anything else, I'm unable to tame it. It has a life of its own, so it's nice. It's an interesting thing. For once, an instrument that you could almost have no real control of, and I think it's a very interesting interaction with an inanimate object being an instrument. Somehow, when you perform it, it responds to you back in a very different way. So I think the function of new instrumentation that way is what excites me more than gadgets, because the thing about gadgets is that the variables are relatively set. If you mix it with a different effect, you get different variables, different stuff that you could get. But with acoustics, I guess the physicality of it excites me, and you could actually mutate it into something else if you think about it long enough.
How did your experimentation with the overhead projector started?
Basically, it happened by accident. It was for a night fest, I think about 4 years back, because we wanted to start off-cuff. And off-cuff, as mentioned, consists of two visual elements and two sound elements. And we already have a guy, Jun, who is doing digital visuals, and I wanted to explore what I can do with analog. So we were like thinking of things like, what we're thinking of?
In the early stages?
Yeah.
I mean, we were using worms and...
Yeah, but before the projector, the overhead projector...
Oh, you just want to play with shadows?
Yeah, I wanted to play with shadows. So we so-called by chance, not by chance but I purchased an overhead projector, and then that's how the experimentation started. And it's still constantly surprising me because I don't really know, like you can add so many things inside, and then so like the vocabulary keeps on growing and growing each time. And the good thing about experimenting is that it is never ending. Like it's not defined and it's not fixed, and even within a performance I can be surprised at a new thing, like hey, you know, this is something new, I can try and do it again. Yeah, so the having no control and somewhat control of it in both ends is really good. Yeah.
You guys have interest in interdisciplinary work, and you guys often tap, this is from an interview I realized, you guys often tap the culture and language, and you often investigate the correlation between visuals and sonic language, and formulate an audio-visual performance revolving around narrative. So is there a narrative that is in this EP or the live performance that you're about to do?
Quite a few actually. Yeah. Like I think when we started this project as well, it was from one word, which was worms.
Yeah.
That was pretty much what we started with, and it was based on like both of us like were proposing the fact that we should be a little bit more disciplined at the way we handle our processes and our experimentation.
So then it gets too open and there's no encourage or sort. So we decide to anchor it to a word, and then from that word we came up with
worms. The reason we ended up with nature, like I don't know how that came about, but with nature, you know, it was just this. If you look at nature in Singapore, all the trees are sort of like implanted. They're not naturally from around here. They're sort of like
someone placed them there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's decorative. You know, it serves a certain aesthetic function in Singapore. Whereas, you know, if you think about nature, when you go out to like I don't know Sabah or even you know, in mountains in Indonesia, that's where that's where the real beauty is. It's untamed. You are almost overwhelmed by the magnitude of what nature actually is. So, but you know, the man's proclivity is that we want to be able to manipulate, you know, our environment, our surroundings in order to survive, in order to be, or in order to, you know, to put forth something else. You know, like the city, for instance, you have to control nature in order to build the city that way. So what we wanted was, you know, on that concept, you know, and based on what we do as well. So now that the overhead projector and the new snare, they have their own nature, be able to control them, and so that's sort of like how we structured it around. So we kind of did away with worms, and then we started thinking about nature in general. So I think even the landscapes, the visuals that Ila did, you know, you like this in the middle here is like a really powerful image for us. It reminds us of a sun, you know, and space clouds that's blocking it of some sort. So the fact that these came from
Space
clouds, space clouds, you know, that it came from an overhead projector, and you know, like she could be in control of these things. Like she would be able to design it and fabricate it to be as such. But these chance encounters sort of like,
I can't do it again.
Right.
Yeah, it makes us think of nature, that some things just happen.
What's your general like musical or visual influences?
I don't know. For me, I wouldn't. I'm not the sort who actually get inspired by specific visual artists or specific musician. It's for me. It's always emotive. Like what I feel when I experience these things. Like it could be like I watch a film and then like, oh, you know, this thing follows me and somehow it shows in my work. Or I read something or I find out about something, and then it's a reactionary kind of inspiration. So it's never fixed and it's always changing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as influences go, relatively similar to what Ila says, but you know, there are sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to come from a musical space or visual space. You know, there are certain writers which actually does you know, influence the way that I think about certain things. So in music, for instance, I'm quite influenced by the writings of a computer scientist, actually, Jaron Lanier, who's also a composer, but he writes a fair bit about the mind, essentially, and it actually excites me when I read about processes that way, about how we interface or interact with our world and the way that we think about sound or whatever life as we know it. So Jaron Lanier has been quite an important person when it comes to thinking about the kind of stuff. Like oddly enough, despite the fact that he's a computer scientist and he writes about these things, I steered away from digital technology because of what he wrote. So there's some sense of irony to that, you know. It's but you know, it's complex, you know. Life is complex that way, so you need to embrace.
You're really interested in how like people consume like visuals, and not only how other people produce their works, but how other people are going to consume like your visual works and your like audio works.
I think because we are sort of like rooted in the concept of experiences. We all experience things in one way or another, in one consciousness or another. So having said that, I think that's what's more interesting, especially when it comes to creating you know, visual work or sound work, because it's always about that next phase after the thing is done, how, you know, people respond to it. I mean, for me as well, when we produce certain musical ideas, we are the most immediate one to respond to it, but we're also not the most immediate one to respond to it. This very important musician of our time, Evelyn Glennie, who's a deaf percussionist, you know, she says that the musician is the one who suffers the most when it comes to a performance, because, for instance, if you play a trumpet or a clarinet, articulation, breath, embouchure, your finger, your muscles, these are the first things that you will experience. The sound comes after. So the ones who would be able to fully experience the sound are the audience. The musician is at the mercy of all these different functions before the first sound is being produced. So I think that makes me think a lot about how we create things and how we also respond to things as well.
Okay, so last question. What are some of the future projects that you guys want to, some ideas that you guys want to explore, or some future projects you guys have in mind?
Yeah, I guess this is one of them actually, the term microprocess, which is an ongoing series of things for us. We want to be able to be a little bit more dedicated and disciplined at our process work. We'd like to be able to chart it, you know, have a little bit more concrete ways of thinking about our work. Means to have a more solid foundation in our vocabulary and the way that we, you know,
because
produce
we have
our work.
somehow have like created quite various vocabulary. So right now is like writing it into pieces. So before that we're always like more open to what we can explore, but now we're trying to structure it. So that is like future projects coming up, and I guess we've been practicing that only, like we're not so conscious about it. Usually like we explore and then the concept comes.
Yeah.
But now we want to have probably
The discipline
to structure it first and then see what comes out.